Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Byte of the Week. It's your weekly digest of all the interesting and fun things. Well, often fun things, always interesting. Things that are happening in the world of technology in the Bay Area and all over the world. So let's jump right in. It's been a really good week for SpaceX. They had a couple very big things go successfully. This week, the first one is their Falcon 9 rocket. They're testing this rocket's ability to take off and land vertically, which is crazy because up to this point, things coming back to Earth have often just like splashed down in the ocean, and that's definitely a tricky thing to do, but it's a lot easier because it's you just have the ocean and it's just landing in the ocean. So much more difficult is landing it back at the place where it started or some other launch pad somewhere. Obviously, retrieving something from the ocean is extraordinarily difficult, whereas if it just lands right back at where it started or at some other launch pad, you can take it away and reuse it. And that's just really, it makes subsequent missions a lot easier and just lowers the cost of that operation. So they've invested heavily in making rockets have the ability to take off and land vertically. And it's still something that they're continuing to work on and develop. So it was a big win for them this week when the Falcon 9 was able to do that successfully. Now, the other big thing from SpaceX this week was their refueling mission to the space station, the ISS, International Space Station. That happened successfully. They went up, they brought about 5,500 pounds of equipment, fuel, supplies for the astronauts living there, and they were trying to dock with them previously, but because of a GPS error, that didn't work out, and so they had to loop around and try again this week, and they were able to successfully connect, and that rocket will be on the space station for about a month, if I remember correctly, to help with the supply needs. Now, in other interesting news, well, this is VR news. In VR news, there's a Kickstarter campaign going on right now called Hardlight VR. And basically what that is a bodysuit. It's an abdomen length suit, so it sits on, it's kind of like a laser tag jacket that you wear, those. So you put it on and it's all over your shoulders, all the way down to your abdomen. It goes around your arms as well, and basically has a bunch of haptic feedback mechanisms that create sensations that you would experience if you were in the world of the game. And that's really significant because up to this point, VR has been largely visual and then like maybe some haptic feedback in the hands. So it's basically expanding the feedback from the virtual reality world that you're in. Now it's not just going to be engaging your senses and like maybe some vibrations in your hands. Now it's going to be giving those sensations to your whole upper body. And so that has obviously some very interesting applications in gaming as a whole. You can think of, like, for example, if you're in a shooter, you can have the bullets, for example, hitting you and you'd feel that like right there. They were talking about in their promotional video, they were talking about boxing games. They were talking about like getting hit with a sword, and so you'd feel like some kind of sensation like going across your body like this. It's really interesting and definitely like a new level of immersion for VR use. It's been interesting to see technology progress without mass adoption. It's definitely not like VR as a whole, I don't believe, is a nascent technology anymore. I think that it's very strong and almost mature at this point. But at the same time, because the barrier to entry is so high, there's been relatively little adoption on the consumer end because you just need a really powerful computer. You need a super expensive headset and so on. But once the cost to owning a VR compatible computer, once the cost of the headsets go down, I think that it will be very well received by people because of the fact that like the experience will be so immersive at this point because the technology will be so well developed by then. So I'm very excited to that. I personally don't own a VR headset, but I think I would if it was like half as much or a third as much. And I think that there are a lot of people who are in that boat as well. I suspect that that is coming in the future, and we'll definitely follow up on that and actually get one at some point if that happens. One of the very drastic things that happened this week, it's interesting, but it's not good. So there was a report given to Cloudflare, which is a CDN provider, and it was given to them basically saying, hey, there's a vulnerability in your code that allows some HTML that's getting parsed. It's basically getting a memory leak, and so people who are like looking for that can pick up on server traffic that's going in and out, and they can potentially pick up people's emails, passwords, authentication tokens, things like that. Now, Cloudflare, as a security company and as a very widely used CDN, they service about 5 million websites, and so the fact that there's like a vulnerability that would let people's passwords potentially get leaked out, that was very, very serious. It's an extraordinarily serious problem, and Cloudflare was very aware of that and worked around the clock. Apparently it took them about a week or a little less than a week to diagnose the problem and to rectify it. First off, I want to say, change your passwords. It's very important at this point. And if you're not using a password manager like LastPass, for example, I would say definitely investigate that one and use that one, or use an alternate one if you prefer. This type of news is, I would say, serious, but not necessarily a cause for concern. It's more of a wake-up call to say, like, hey, even, Cloudflare, I'm sure, employs like some of the best information security people in the world, no doubt. But this like one oversight had the potential impact that it does, wherein if somebody noticed that vulnerability and took advantage of it for the past several months, they could have captured a ton of people's email and password. Now, we don't know that they did, because we don't know for a fact that hackers have identified this bug and exploited it, but it is out there as a possibility. Now, I want to go a little bit into some details about like what that bug entailed. So Cloudflare uses an HTML parser called Regal, and there is one part of it that does an equality check. So it says if something equals this, and if that condition is met, then something happens. Now, what it should have been, instead of equals equals for the equality check, it should have been right angle bracket equals, which means greater than or equal to. Now, and so that means that it was like one character off, and like one character being incorrect allowed this massive vulnerability to take place. Now, so the interesting thing is, like, Regal is not something that was made by Cloudflare. It's a third-party software that they use. Now, Cloudflare was very quick to say, this is not a bug in Regal, and it's not Regal's fault that this happened. They said they copped to it, and they said it's our fault then, and we used Regal improperly, basically. But and so I think that like Cloudflare is getting a lot of bad publicity. I think that's kind of unfair. As someone who develops software for a living, it's just really hard to catch something like that. And you can imagine too, regardless of whether you're also a software engineer, that like being off by one character would have the repercussions that it does. I think that they were that they did the right thing in the way that they handled the disclosure. They fixed it as quickly as possible. They informed the world in a blog post, which I'll have a link to in the description. Overall, I would say they did the right thing across the board. And I think that it serves as a nice reminder to us as a whole that, sometimes these things can happen, and it's not necessarily anyone in particular's fault. It just sort of happens as a course of oversight, and it's up to us as consumers to be very responsible with choosing passwords and making sure that we use secure, strong ones across our different services, that we don't use duplicate passwords, basic information security, that we practice that on our parts. Two-factor authentication obviously is huge. That goes a long way in keeping bad people out of your accounts. So the takeaway from this story should not be don't use Cloudflare or don't trust sites that use Cloudflare, but it should be change your passwords and be aware of the potential for breaking and protect yourself. On a much lighter note, Instagram recently launched the ability to post a gallery of 10 pictures at a time instead of just one picture at a time. That's apparently a big deal for some people. I think it's not a feature that I will use very much, but power users of Instagram certainly will have the opportunity now to take advantage of that and to tell a bigger story than could just be conveyed in like one image. So I think it's pretty cool. Maybe I will if I do something where I take multiple images at the same event or whatever I happen to be doing, cooking crepes or what have you. This has been your Bite of the Week. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week.